Hello. In this video, I will be reviewing the 1986 movie Manhunter, directed by Michael Mann. Manhunter follows Will Graham, a former FBI profiler who comes out of retirement to catch a serial killer known as the Tooth Fairy. A lot of people probably think that the first movie to feature the character Hannibal Lecter was Silence of the Lambs. This is not true. He was in Manhunter just 5 years earlier. They are both adaptations of different Thomas Harris books, Red Dragon and The Silence of the Lambs. While they have relatively similar stories, they are fundamentally different movies. Manhunter may not be as good as Silence of the Lambs, but it's still a very good movie. It has a strong 80s aesthetic. The acting, the directing, and the music, which features sort of electronic synth music, all feel very 80s. This could be seen as one of its biggest strengths, or one of its biggest weaknesses. I'm not a huge fan of the aesthetic a lot of movies from the 80s have. I find it often feels silly and is dated very badly. At the start of Manhunter, it was a bit of a problem for me, but after around 10 minutes or so, I sort of got used to it, and I really got into this movie. You could categorize Manhunter as a neo-noir movie. Neo-noir is like a modern version of film noir. It's a genre that is categorized as having a very moody, dark atmosphere, morally ambiguous characters, and themes of crime. Some examples of neo-noir movies are Drive, Taxi Driver, Seven, and Oldboy. Manhunter embodies all of these aspects. Even though it's somewhat dated, it still has a great, moody atmosphere. When Will Graham is investigating the crime scene at the beginning, the house mostly has dark lighting, with a lot of very noticeable shadows. Will is mostly a silhouette with his torch shining brightly, and it creates a striking, stylistic image. When he's talking to Hannibal, the room is fully painted white. It's almost hard to look at because it's just an overload of white, and it makes me feel like I'm in an asylum. The movie almost feels like a graphic novel with its imagery. It shows moral ambiguity, with Will Graham played by William Peterson. What makes him interesting is that despite the fact he's on the right side of the law, he doesn't think very differently to the killers he tries to catch.
I moved to the door. I step into the room.
He's good at catching killers because he's disturbingly good at empathizing with them and immersing himself in their minds.
And I see me desired by you. Accepted. And loved.
This creates a sense of vulnerability. He may be able to catch the Tooth Fairy, but he might not be able to maintain his sanity while doing so. There aren't many police procedural movies like this, where you see it from the point of view from a mentally disturbed character. This makes Manhunter stand out a little bit more. I also think it's kind of cool how he just doesn't take shit from Hannibal. Hannibal says,
Do you have the file with you?
Yes.
Pictures?
Yes.
Let me have them and I might consider it.
he's basically saying, yeah, okay, maybe I'll consider helping you, but let me look at it first, which shows he thinks that he's above Will. Will doesn't let him.
No.
Dream much, Will?
Goodbye, Dr. Lecter.
Just before that he says,
Don't think you can persuade me with appeals to my intellectual vanity.
I don't think I'll persuade you at all. You'll either do it or you won't.
what surprised me quite a lot is that Hannibal isn't in this movie very much. In Silence of the Lambs, he's a main character, but here, he's just a part of the story. Not to discredit Brian Cox's performance, because he does a great job. It's just the movie isn't as focused on him as I would have expected. That isn't even a bad thing. He works very well as a piece of the story. One thing that made me slightly hesitant to watch this movie was seeing someone other than Anthony Hopkins play Hannibal Lecter. And while Brian Cox may not be as good as him, that doesn't make his performance any less great. He gives a more calm, understated performance than Hopkins did, but he still captures the character very well. The thing that makes the character of Hannibal Lecter interesting is despite the fact that he's a cannibal, he's very polite and formal. In Silence of the Lambs, there were some scenes where he almost came across as likable, and it makes you feel kind of uncomfortable watching it. While I wouldn't quite go that far for this version, he still captures the politeness and formalness of the character. I think that Hannibal Lecter is a good way to compare Manhunter to Silence of the Lambs. Even though Hannibal is better in Silence of the Lambs, and Silence of the Lambs is overall a better movie, it doesn't take away from the fact that Manhunter still stands on its own. Francis Dollarhide, or the Tooth Fairy, played by Tom Noonan, is quite a good villain. Even though he's creepy and he's a serial killer, you get the idea that he never really had the chance to lead a normal life. He's deeply disturbed and has feelings of low confidence, distorted self-perception, and a traumatic childhood. He's deeply insecure about how his face looks, so even when he's in front of someone he's about to kill, he wears a mask. Although in the movie, he meets a blind girl named Reba, who he genuinely feels a connection with. Since she can't see him, he doesn't feel insecure about his face around her. He takes her back to his house, but he doesn't kill her. He talks to her, and they have sex. This is one of the only positive interactions he has with any of the characters in this movie. He goes to her house later and sees one of her co-workers talking to her. He's very insecure and disturbed, so he thinks that they are kissing, and he gets angry. It's important to remember that even though he's somewhat sympathetic, the movie doesn't try to justify his actions at all. He's a murderer. It may not be his fault that he's like this, but it does not condone him being a serial killer. It would be so easy to make him out to just be a mindless, emotionless killer, but this movie doesn't do that. This movie realistically portrays him as a person who's been abused in his childhood and has trauma that's made it pretty much impossible for him to live a normal life. So overall, Manhunter may not be perfect, but it's still a very well-made movie, and I will be giving it 4.5 stars. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Bye.